Well, hello everyone. Welcome to Unit 5. In this unit, we're going to be looking at light bars and guidance systems. And once again, we're kind of following the evolution of when precision ag hardware first came out. Um, we looked at, we saw GPS and then yield monitors, and kind of right after that is light bars and guidance is kind of the next step that took place with precision ag. So that's kind of why we're going to bring it up at this time in this course and kind of follow that same timeline. So to kind of begin with, question I usually ask everyone is, who has used a light bar system or a guidance system? When I first started teaching this class, it was fairly rare that you would have someone that had experience with it. Now it's fairly common, and so what I do have out there is on Blackboard, I do have a discussion post, and this is kind of a way for those that have operated a system. Share us your thoughts on how it went. What did you learn? What advice would you give to someone that wants to do it? And then for those of you that haven't had any experience, what I want you to do is talk about what you think it would be like. What is kind of your biggest hang up, or what do you think the biggest issue is going to be for you in implementing it? And then, take a look and comment on what others have said, and just kind of do some open dialogue. It's kind of fun. When I ask this in class, you get a lot of interesting responses now, especially from those that use it. A lot of different systems out there and things. So yeah, it is something that is now becoming more fairly commonplace, as we've seen. And what you see here on the screen, the big picture, this is actually from my own farming operation a couple years ago. You'll kind of see where this field comes back up into play, but if you take a look there, you can see I dropped it. This was when I was planting in the spring, and I dropped a marker, and I actually had to make an adjustment to the auto steering system, so you kind of see that coming into play. So to kind of begin with some basic terminology, and you hear light bar, you hear guidance, some people think it's maybe the same thing, and so this is kind of, we'll clarify that right here. So a light bar is basically where we're going to use GPS signals, and those signals are going to help us guide the operator from one point to another point, pass after pass. And you're going to see a light bar system coming up here shortly, but the light bar system basically guides the operator. Operator still has to do all the steering, but basically it's telling the operator which way they need to steer. So that's a light bar system. A guidance system is we're going to add on to that light bar system. So we're going to use light bar technology and some additional equipment to where it's actually guidance systems will actually steer the equipment, whether it's a tractor or a combine or a sprayer. It's going to steer that equipment with little or no input. Most of the time, the operator is not having to do anything. So we're going to use light bar technology and equipment to actually steer the equipment with little or no input from the operator. So that's kind of the two big terms that we'll hear going forward. Now, when light bar systems first came out, when guidance systems first started coming out, a lot of people says, well, there's this thing called the foam marker, or, I have my planter marker. So foam markers work just as great, right? Well, the one advantage of a foam marker system is a foam marker system is going to be a lot cheaper in terms when you want to purchase it versus a light bar or a guidance system. It is going to be a lot cheaper. That's the only advantage they have. After that, where they really fall off is in terms of accuracy. Cause if you look at that picture there on that that sprayer with a foam marker, imagine if you have a sprayer with a 120-foot boom. So the edge of that boom is going to be 60 feet away from you. And in this case, it's behind us. It's behind the sprayer. So you're constantly having to look back to see where is that foam marker lining up with the original foam pass than it did on the pass before. So if it's sitting out there quite a ways, it's a lot harder to try and line it up. So along with it is this picture here makes it look easy because you're in a field with no canopy. Imagine a soybean field or a cornfield where you're spraying. that foam may fall down underneath the canopy, so you may not see it sometimes. So then you could get off on your pattern. And the other thing too is that foam, that foam will dissipate after a while. It has a limited life. And you're going to see a little bit later on is where utilizing a guided system, we can come back and use the same pattern time and time again later on, whether it's in the next 20 minutes or in 2 years. So yeah, foam markers had their place in the market, but now because of the guidance systems, and even now you can even question the cheaper part because some of the guidance systems have become really affordable. Where it's probably there's some out there that probably cost the same amount that you would for a foam marking system. So a little background. Light bars kind of started coming around in the late 1990s is when we first started seeing them coming onto the market. And the basic light bar, there's kind of a representative photo there. Basically what it was something that you had mounted in the cab or out on the hood. And it was just a simple row of lights. So you can kind of see on that device there. It was a row of lights. And once you plugged in the basic information like the width of your pass, and the type of path that you want to take, like a straight one or like a curve, once you set that up and you got those settings set, all you had to do was follow the lights. So the 3 green lights in the center, as you kind of see there in the picture, that meant you were traveling on the center. And even on the screen, some of them had a little screen there where it would tell you how far are you off from one side or the other. And if you started going off that path and those lights would start moving from the green into the reds of the direction that you need to start steering. So basically you just follow the lights. So if that one started moving, if we started drifting a little bit to the left, well, the lights are going to start going to the right. So we're going to start following those lights and trying to get back on that center line. So that was kind of the basic light bar system. They're still available. There's numerous companies out there, Ag Leader, Trimble. I believe John Deere even has a basic light bar system. It's something you can put out at the end of the hood, plug in your basic information, and just go. And they're relatively cheap and inexpensive. So the one thing you do want to notice in this photo, and I always bring this up in my lectures, you can see that the photo is courtesy of Ag Leader. This is a photo that Ag Leader had part of their marketing materials. But if you looked on the device, on this guiding system, light bar system, you notice the tag says Trimble. Well, for a long time there, Trimble was actually making the hardware for Ag Leader. And so it wasn't uncommon that if you got this device, you took it out of the box, it'd have a Trimble tag on it, or it'd have the Ag Leader tag, but it was the same thing. So for numerous years there, Ag Leader and Trimble actually were in a partnership. Wasn't until I believe it was like 2009, 2010 era, and that time frame is when Ag Leader and Trimble kind of separated and went their own separate ways. But just kind of one of those little precision ag history pieces I like to throw out there. So that was kind of where it got started. And kind of where we've evolved to today is color screens. And those color screens give us a nice little 3D view. You can see a couple of representative photos there from Trimble. So we have that option. We also have now taken, instead of just the light bar telling us where to go, now that system's actually going to drive the piece of equipment. So the tractor, the combine, the sprayer, even a utility vehicle. Our college here, we have a utility vehicle that we've hooked up an auto steering system on. So we've seen that. We've also seen John Deere has what's called their iTech Pro system. And so that's where we've come through today. Quite a bit there. So this video here is actually it's kind of a good funny way to talk about John Deere's iTech Pro. This is one of the commercials they did back in the day when it first came about, just to kind of sell people on it and the importance of it. So watch this little video, sit back and enjoy it. How was that? Kind of interesting, right? Or not really interesting, but more fun is the way I put it. Kind of a comical way of kind of introducing it. Here's kind of another video. And once again, I got this off of YouTube. The one thing I'll note is when I show this to my local John Deere dealer, they said John Deere does not endorse this vehicle because, as you kind of will notice, there is no one riding in the cab or no one sitting in the cab. And John Deere's iTech Pro is very. They want people to know that you need to be in the cab for it to work. So, go ahead and watch this video. Okay. Once again, kind of a unique way of showing what John Deere's iTech Pro system can do. And here's where guidance and steering go to the max, where now it's even picking up the implement, turning around, dropping that implement, and taking off to the other end of the field. So, kind of interesting. This is another video. The folks at MacDon put this out. A lot of times when we're thinking about the auto steering and the guidance, we're just thinking about planting and tillage and things like that. Here's one where MacDon puts it on their equipment for mowing hay or processing crops. And I'm one that used to spend a lot of summers round baling, and of course with round baling I also had to go mow quite a few fields. I would have killed for a system like these back in that day. So once again, watch this video and kind of see where guidance takes place in terms of the forage industry. Okay, so kind of interesting. And if you notice a couple of those, I don't know if they sped those videos up or not, but man, they were flying through the field. It seemed like so, and all auto steering and yeah, it's once again. I wish I would have had something like this back in my hay baling days. So we'll kind of wrap up this part of the video series with just kind of giving you an example of what guidance and auto steering systems have done for us. So this is kind of my story. Um, so we have a field. It's a field we've been farming for years. And if you take a look at this photo here, you can kind of see this is from planting a couple years ago. Actually, I dropped the marker just so I could see what it looked like. And this field, there's the marker. You could see that is fairly straight all the way to the other end of the field. And to give you a reference, that's kind of what the field looks like from overhead. And it is 3/4 of a mile from the bottom end of that field to the top end of the field. So the photo there that I took is where we're sitting down at the bottom end of that field, and we're looking north. So you can see the acreage over the right hand side relates to that acreage sitting on the right hand side up there. One of the things with when it comes to auto steering and the guidance is what we call the time savings. And so I'll give you an example. So in 2009, we didn't have auto steering at that time. And that field in 2009 was 102 acres. We actually added a little bit more to the left-hand side of what you see there in the boundary. So it was 102 acres. And in 2009, we didn't have any auto steering. Went back and looked at the data. We were still logging it with a GPS. And it took a little over 6.5 hours to plant that field. So do the math. Basically, we can plant at 15.6 acres an hour. So that's what it took to plant that field. Now, in 2017, we had auto steering. We added it back in 2013. But in 2017, we had the 102 acres. It was the same number of acres that we had in 2009. Here's the thing. It only took 5.6 hours to plant. Basically, we cut almost a whole hour out of planting that field just by adding auto steering. And the calculation came up to 18.2 acres an hour. Run the math and you do the scenario is that we were able to get through another, we could cover another 2.6 acres an hour more just from that auto steering. And the reason for that is, I go down the end of the field. When I pick up the planter and turn around, as soon as I start turning around, I engage the auto steer system. It takes over. That allows me to focus in on the back of the planter, and I could drop the planter without having to worry about, do I need to drop it now or later? Trying to stay on my mark. The tractor takes over the steering. That allows me to focus on what's going on the back of the planter. So I don't have to stop and drop the planter and take off like I typically would have in the past. Or start turning around, I'm not straight, so stop, back up, position myself to start dropping in and going straight. Growing up, when I was planting, one of the things that we saw in the neighborhood was bragging rights. So those bragging rights are pretty important, that you want to make sure all your rows look straight, because no one wanted to drive through the countryside and see rows crooked and all that. So 2.6 acres an hour more is what it has saved us. And we typically every year we'll have about 500 acres of corn that we plant. Did the calculation, that saves us about 5 hours. The one thing you look at that 5 hours, that's 5 hours less that I'm running my tractor, so I'm saving that fuel expense. The wear and tear on our equipment. Same thing happens when we carried over the tillage, because we've seen time savings in our tillage utilizing auto steering. Here's one of the biggest things that I've seen in utilizing auto steering. It's not only time savings, but what it's done to my mental health. Excuse me. This field here alone, it takes a whole day to plant it. Back in 2009, when we didn't have auto steering, you spend a lot of time watching the marker up front to make sure you're going straight, and then also having to focusing on the planter on the back, make sure that we're not running out of seed, or watching the skips and the doubles and things like that. Now with all of that is I can focus in on that planter. I don't have to be sitting there watching that mark up front and stressing out all the time. I get done at the end of the day. In this case here, this in 2017, we got done with this field. We were still able to go on and do a 40-acre field nearby and get it done the same day. Never would have happened in the past. And at the end of the day, I'm more relaxed and I'm a lot easy. It's a lot easier on me. So that is kind of what we've seen what these can do. And some of those things we can't put a dollar amount on. So that's kind of the first part of this video lecture series. We're going to stop it right here because this is kind of a nice natural breaking point, and we'll pick it up in the next video here where we're going to start looking at some of the different patterns and some of the adjustments and some of the things we need to think about with an auto steering system. So until then, thanks.